I was driving home late in the afternoon, the kind of day where the sky already feels heavy before night even falls. My route took me past my son-in-law's street, and without really thinking about it, I slowed down. I had been meaning to check on him, maybe stop by for a quick visit, but then I saw it. Parked right at the gate was my wife's black Audi. It should have been sitting quietly in our garage, not outside Victor's house. My chest tightened with a feeling I couldn't explain away. Something was wrong. I knew it before I even stepped out of my car. My hands trembled as I walked closer, careful not to make a sound. The curtains were parted just enough. I leaned in toward the open window, and then I heard them. Words that cut deeper than anything I had ever faced. Words that changed everything.
Before we continue, do me a favor. Hit like and subscribe so you never miss what's next.
I slowed my car as I approached the corner, tires crunching against loose gravel, the steering wheel steady beneath my hands, though my pulse was anything but. My route home rarely took me this way, but that afternoon something told me to pass. Down the road toward Victor's house, maybe it was instinct, maybe habit, I told myself it was nothing, just curiosity. But then I saw her car, Elaine's black Audi, parked directly in front of his gate as if it belonged there. My wife's car, the one I had washed myself 2 days ago in our own driveway, the one that should have been resting in our garage. For a moment, my brain tried to explain it away. Maybe Elaine had dropped something off for Claire. Maybe she was helping Victor with errands. Maybe this had some innocent answer, but the longer I stared at that Audi gleaming in the late afternoon light, the more my stomach tightened. I cut the engine. The silence rushed in, filling the space where rational thoughts had been. The keys dangled from the ignition as I sat frozen, gripping the wheel until my knuckles whitened. Earlier that day, I had spoken to Claire, our daughter, on the phone. She told me she was out running errands, said Victor was home working on paperwork, in for a case. She was cheerful, unsuspecting. I'd even suggested we all meet for dinner later. She laughed, promised to call me back. That was only an hour ago. And now here was Elaine's Audi, casually parked in Victor's driveway. The weight in my chest told me not to ignore it. I stepped out of the car quietly, shutting the door with deliberate care. The April air was brisk, sharp against my face. My shoes crunched against the gravel, and I winced at every sound, as though the earth itself might betray me. The curtains in Victor's front room were drawn, but not completely. A narrow gap allowed a glimpse inside. My feet carried me closer. Before my mind had truly decided, I stopped beneath the window, back pressed against the brick wall, my breath shallow. At first there was only silence, broken by the faint ticking of a clock inside. Then voices drifted out, carried by the stillness of the evening. I recognized Elaine's voice immediately. 28 years of marriage makes you fluent in someone's tone. Only this time, her words did not carry warmth or familiarity. They slid through the window like poison. When the old fool finally signs the papers, everything falls into place, the old fool. That was me. Her voice was followed by Victor's, calm and smooth, the professional cadence he used in court. The timeline is solid. File by July. With the statutes in play, you'll receive half of all marital assets plus guaranteed support. My chest tightened as if an invisible hand had closed around it. I could barely breathe. Elaine laughed softly, a sound that once meant comfort to me, but now rang hollow. The hardware stores alone are worth $8 million. Add the rental houses and savings accounts, $14 million easily. More than enough to live the life I deserve, the life she deserved. As though the years I had poured into building those stores, the nights I had worked until dawn, the sacrifices I had made were not ours but mine alone. Mine to be stripped from me. My knees weakened, and I pressed harder against the wall to steady myself. Then Victor spoke again, his tone laced with arrogance. "The best part is his trust. He has no idea we've been collecting records for months. Bank statements, property deeds, tax documents. It's all here." I risked a glance through the curtains. There on the coffee table lay a folder, thick, manila, bulging with papers. My papers. I gripped my phone with shaking hands, thumb fumbling. Across the screen until the recording app blinked red, my instincts told me I needed proof, something undeniable. Elaine's voice drifted out again. 28 years of pretending, of listening to his boring store stories, smiling through his endless talk of expansion. The man still believes I love him. The words sliced deeper than anything before. A twig snapped beneath my foot. The sound cracked through the air like thunder. Inside, silence fell. "Did you hear that?" Elaine's tone sharpened with suspicion. Victor paused, then scoffed. "Probably just a neighbor's cat. You worry too much." I pressed myself flat against the wall, my heartbeat pounding so hard I feared it would give me away. Sweat slid down my temple despite the chill. "Still," Elaine muttered, her voice quieter. "If Colin ever found out—" "He won't," Victor interrupted firmly. "He's too trusting, too blind. By September, you'll be free, wealthy, and finally living the life you deserve." Their laughter followed, low and conspiratorial. Stayed frozen, the phone recording every word, until their conversation resumed its steady rhythm. Each sentence was another blade, cutting away the foundation of the life I thought I had. 15 minutes passed before I dared to move. Slowly, carefully, I retraced my steps to the car, every sense heightened. Once inside, I slammed the lock down with shaking fingers and gripped the steering wheel. My reflection stared back at me in the rearview mirror. The face of a man who had given nearly 3 decades to a marriage built on lies. I thought of Elaine on our wedding day, radiant in white silk, promising forever. I thought of the nights we stayed up with Claire as a baby, the birthdays, the anniversaries, the quiet mornings over coffee. How much of it had been real? My mind replayed her words. The man still believes I love him. Until 30 minutes ago, I did. The front door of Victor's house creaked open. Elaine emerged first, her handbag swinging at her side, her hair perfectly styled. Victor followed, adjusting his tie, his expression smug even in casual movements. Elaine's eyes widened when she saw me sitting in my car. The shock on her face was immediate, undeniable. Colin, her voice pitched higher than usual, forced cheer over panic. "What are you doing here?" I forced a smile that didn't reach my eyes. Years of business negotiations had trained me to mask my emotions. "Just finished checking one of the stores nearby. Thought I'd stop in and see Claire." Victor moved slightly closer to Elaine, a protective stance, his eyes narrowing as he studied me. "She's not here," Elaine said quickly. I was helping Victor with some documents." The lie slipped out too easily. Practiced, I glanced toward Victor. "Busy day?" "Complicated case," he said smoothly. "Asset division." The irony burned like acid. I nodded, feigning casual indifference. "Well, I'll let you both get back to it. Dinner won't cook itself." Elaine smiled tightly. "I'll be home later after we finish up." "Of course," I replied. I started the car, the engine breaking the silence. As I pulled out of the driveway, I caught sight of them in the mirror, standing close, whispering urgently the moment they thought I was gone. They didn't know about the recording. 43 minutes of crystal-clear audio, their own voices, weaving the story of betrayal. The world I had built was already burning, but now I held the match in my hands. I drove home on autopilot, hands steady on the wheel, while the rest of me felt hollowed out. The sun was dropping behind the bare trees, turning the road into a ribbon of dull copper. I rolled past familiar mailboxes and trimmed hedges I used to notice, but tonight my eyes kept drifting to the passenger seat where my phone lay face down, recording saved, Red dot gone, proof sealed inside a glass rectangle I suddenly hated. I parked in the driveway and just sat there listening to the car settle. The porch light clicked on by its timer. That small domestic loyalty felt cruel. For 28 years I had arranged this house to take care of us when we forgot to take care of each other. Tonight, it did its job anyway. The door opened into quiet, not the soft kind that means peace, the kind that waits, ears pricked. I set my keys in the bowl by the entry and felt a tremor go through my hands. I breathed through it and made myself move the way I always moved at this hour. Shoes in the hallway rack, jacket on the hook, mail stacked by the fruit bowl on the kitchen counter. One envelope slid crooked. I straightened it like that would matter. I turned on the stove and filled the kettle because the body understands rituals when the brain shuts down. Elaine kept her favorite tea in a painted tin above the spice rack. I reached for it and pulled my hand back as if the tin might burn. I chose plain coffee instead. The mug felt heavier than it should have. I watched the drip for far too long, hypnotized by something simple that didn't argue, didn't lie, didn't pretend. I carried the mug to the table and sat where I always sit. Light from the over-the-sink fixture cut a tight circle across the wood. I could see small knife scratches, long and pale, from when Claire was 10 and insisted on helping me chop carrots. Back then, Elaine had laughed and told us both we were a danger to ourselves. She snapped a photo of the mess on the cutting board and framed it. The framed photo still hangs in the hallway. I did not look at it. The garage door rumbled, tires eased across concrete, a car door shut, then another. The kitchen clock clicked over to 7:20. Elaine stepped in 30 seconds later, bringing cold air and perfume with her. She moved easily, like someone walking into safety. Her eyes flicked across my face and then away, but not before I saw the quick calculation. She told me she left work early because of a headache and got delayed picking up a gift for a friend whose mother was ill. Her voice had the soft weight she used for plausible half-truths. She asked if I had eaten. She asked if I could warm up the roast from last night. She asked if the store inspection went well. These were ordinary questions wrapped around a new core I had heard through a window. I said the inspection was fine. I said I would heat the roast. I said she should sit. I did not ask about the car at someone else's gate. I did not ask why her voice at that window sounded like someone else's mouth. I cut meat into careful slices while she sat at the counter and scrolled through her phone like always. We moved in a choreography we had learned by heart. Halfway through her plate, she mentioned that Claire had called to say she might run late after dinner tomorrow because Victor needed help with paperwork. I nodded and kept my eyes on the cutting board. She asked if I minded rescheduling the landscaper to Friday. I said I would handle it. When she set her fork down, the sound was louder than it had any right to be. After, she said she was tired and needed a bath. She paused at the doorway, looked back and smiled with a sweetness I used to trust. She said goodnight in a tone that asked me to be the man I had always been. I told her goodnight. I waited until the bath water finished running, and the bedroom door clicked shut before I let the breath out of my chest. In the office down the hall, I closed the door, turned the lock, and set my phone on the desk. I made myself open the recording and listen to the first minute again, not to punish myself, to settle the part of my mind that still wanted to call this a misunderstanding. The voices came through clear. The plan was not a misunderstanding. I hit stop and stared at the wall until my eyes watered. Then I started the work. First, I labeled the audio file with the date and time. I made 3 digital backups, each to a different cloud drive, each with an innocuous name. Then I copied it to 2 encrypted USB sticks from the office safe and slid one into an envelope addressed to myself at the store's central office. The other I taped inside the cardboard sleeve of an old instruction manual and filed it under small appliances where no one but me ever looks. Paper fails, electronics fail, paranoia is cheaper than grief. I took photos of the black Audi at the gate. I had snapped them from the car, but hadn't checked. They were good enough. Timestamps visible. I printed those along with a screenshot of recent calls to Claire and the nothingness that followed. I did not want to use any of this, but wanting and needing had already separated. A notebook waited in the bottom desk drawer, the thick, lined kind I use for inventory when we open. A new store. I wrote the date at the top and drew a line down the center. On the left I wrote what I know. On the right I wrote what I can prove. Then I started filling both columns in slow, single strokes because clarity likes order. What I know: my wife met with my son-in-law without our daughter present. They discussed a timeline, a filing month, and an expected division of assets. They laughed about my trust. What I can prove: a recording of their voices discussing a plan to seize marital property. Photographs of my wife's car at his gate. The day and time Claire said she was not home. What I know: the total value of our holdings as Elaine understands them. What I can prove: audited statements, valuations, deeds, and the precise structure of the business she has never actually read. I turned the page and began a second list. This one I labeled immediate boundaries. End all shared device access, change passwords, confirm two-factor authentication on the store systems, review power of attorney documents, and revoke any that extend beyond medical emergencies. Freeze joint credit lines for security verification. These were not punishments. They were sandbags against a rain that had already started. Halfway down the list, a memory arrived uninvited. A small one. A rainy morning years ago, when the power had gone out, and the three of us sat in the kitchen, wrapped in blankets, eating cereal from the box and laughing. Claire had asked why the house sounded different in the dark. Elaine told her the walls were resting. I sat there feeling a warmth so settled I thought it could not end. The memory folded itself away and left a clean ache. I called the night manager at my flagship store and told him I might be reachable less over the next week. He said everything was under control and asked if there was anything he should know. I told him to verify any unusual vendor requests directly with me and thanked him for his patience. Then I wrote a name on the third page of my notebook: Miriam Hale. She's a quiet attorney with a small office and a reputation for being both thorough and kind. I met her years ago when a supplier tried to bully us into a bad contract. I trusted the way she looked at problems. I would call her in the morning. No threats, no drama, just facts. The house settled around me as the hour pushed on. I could hear Elaine moving in the bedroom, hangers sliding, a drawer closing. The light under the door dimmed. I set the notebook aside and stared at the family calendar pinned to the cork board beside the desk. Claire's birthday dinner next month. A reminder to change the HVAC filters. A sticky note that said remember to pick up the blue paint for the porch rail. Ordinary anchors, all of them. I got up, walked to the hallway, and stopped by the frame with the crooked photo of carrots on the cutting board. Claire's face in that picture is all cheeks and stubborn joy. Elaine has flour on her nose. I remember thinking that day how lucky I was, how decent life had turned out despite the hard work and small losses. I remember deciding to keep taking pictures on the ordinary days, not just the glamorous ones, because ordinary was where love lived. Back in the office, I wrote another heading. What I will not do. I will not scream. I will not beg. I will not let them turn me into a man I do not recognize. I will not accuse my daughter of anything she has not done. I will not poison her against anyone. I will not bury the truth to keep the peace. Beneath that I wrote what I will do. I will show her what is real. I will put the facts in order. I will protect the stores and the people who work for me. I will remember that love and strategy can live in the same person. Near midnight, I brewed fresh coffee because sleep was not coming and the work was not finished. I opened the safe and checked our important documents: birth certificates, insurance, policies. The old will I have meant to update for months. I set the will aside and made another note to call the estate planner, not to punish anyone, to prevent disaster from getting bigger. The phone buzzed. A message from Claire. Just checking on you and Mom. Love you. I typed back that I loved her. 2, that we would talk tomorrow. That I hoped her evening had been quiet. I stared at those words after I sent them and felt something inside me steady. Love is not a currency. It is a compass. Tonight I needed both. I shut the office light and sat in the dark a while longer, letting the shape of the plan settle in my bones. The anger had cooled into something else, the metal of it tempered by the hours. I stood, stretched, and listened. To the house breathe. You can learn a lot in a quiet room. You can hear your own voice when you stop filling the air with questions that have already been answered. In the guest room, I lay on top of the blankets and stared at the ceiling where a faint seam ran like a vein above the light fixture. The recording sat inches away on the nightstand inside a black phone case. Proof can be a heavy thing, even when it weighs almost nothing. I set an alarm for dawn and closed my eyes. I dreamed about Claire at 6 years old, running down the hall in socks, sliding on the polished floor and crashing into my legs. I dreamed about Elaine in a blue dress the first year we were married, spinning in the kitchen while a song played on the radio and a pot boiled over, and we laughed like we owned that moment forever. I dreamed I was standing outside a window, with my hand against the brick, listening to 2 familiar voices say unfamiliar things. When morning came, light found its way through the blinds in shy stripes. I sat up, felt the stiffness in my back, and knew the next part had to start. I dressed in quiet clothes that did not make statements and brewed coffee strong enough to carry me through the first calls. The house was still. The plan was not. I wrote one more line in the notebook before I picked up the phone. Today, I moved from shock to structure. Then I dialed the first number on my list. Morning arrived like a verdict. Pale light slid under the blinds and laid thin bars across the floor. I sat up slowly, the kind of careful movement you make when you are not sure what in you might break if you stand too fast. The plan I wrote last night waited on the desk, open to the line that said, "Move from shock to structure." I read it once, then twice, until the words felt like rails I could hold on to. I brewed coffee stronger than usual and drank the first cup in 3 long swallows. The second, I poured into a travel mug. At 7:30, I stepped onto the porch and let the air clear my head. The yard smelled like wet soil and juniper, the scent I always associate with beginnings when we opened a new store and the landscapers had just laid fresh mulch. Today, it smelled like work. I called Miriam Hale at 8 sharp. Her receptionist answered with the same unhurried calm I remembered. Miriam picked up before the second ring. "Good morning, Colin," she said, as if we had spoken yesterday. "You said it was important. I told her I needed to come in today. I said I had information I could not discuss over the phone and evidence that needed professional hands." My voice surprised me. It was level, with a weight underneath it that did not wobble. She told me she had a slot at 10 if I could be there on time, and if I did not mind the smell of bread, because her office sits above the bakery on Sycamore. I said I would bring my appetite and hung up. Before I left, I checked the house, not for danger, for clarity. The kitchen was clean, the mug I used washed and set to dry. Elaine's scarf hung on the back of a dining chair, a bright loop of silk that looked like it had a memory attached. I did not touch it. I locked my office, pocketed the flash drive, slid the envelope addressed to my work address into my jacket, and walked out. Traffic on Mill Road moved the way it always moved at that hour. Delivery vans, commuters with the same faces you learn without meaning to. The city did not know the shape of my morning had changed. I parked behind the bakery and stood for a second under the vent that throws warm air and cinnamon into the alley. It smelled like comfort on purpose. I watched the steam for a moment, then climbed the stairs. Miriam's office is small, wood-paneled, orderly. A ficus by the window, a framed certificate, and a crooked photo of a chicken someone had drawn, as a thank-you note from a case long ago. She shook my hand like an old friend and gestured to the chair across from her desk. I sat, took out the notebook, the printouts, the flash drive, and my phone. I placed them one by one between us like tools before a repair. I told her everything in the simplest order I could manage. My route, the car at the gate, the window, the voices, the folder on the table, the words that did not leave me. I let her listen to 2 minutes of the recording and watched her face. She did not flinch. When it ended, she clicked her pen, wrote the date, and asked the questions good lawyers ask. Who else knows? Only me. Did you confront either of them? No. Have you changed any financial structures since last night? Not yet, beyond planning and lists. Good, she said. We will do this properly. She explained the line between protection and dissipation, how any move I made needed to be documented as preservation, not punishment. She outlined immediate steps. Secure accounts by adding identity verification without reallocating funds. Pause automatic transfers that are not essential to operations. Remove shared access to business systems not because of spite, but because of security. Put all of it in writing to yourself, to your accountant, to the bank, with clear reasons and dates. She added a second list that was less about numbers and more about habits. No recordings without consent inside your home, she said. Public conversations can be captured where you are allowed to hear, but do not create problems we do not need. Keep a contemporaneous log. Email the log to yourself nightly so there is a timestamp that cannot be argued. No threats, no scenes. Do not tell your daughter anything you cannot support with documents. The courts do not reward dramatic speeches. Colin. They reward clean facts. She slid a crisp folder across to me. Inside were templates, a letter instructing a bank to place a verification hold, a memo to my accountant requesting a preservation audit, a notice revoking non-essential powers of attorney, a statement of intent to maintain ordinary household expenses during marital uncertainty. It was cool, efficient kindness. I signed a retainer, transferred a modest initial fee, and asked her what to do about the recording. Keep the original on. A device you control, she said. Make 2 copies with checksums so we can demonstrate no edits. Keep 1 copy off-site, and do not share the audio with anyone who cannot protect it. She paused. I will get you a list of forensic audio experts if we need them. It sounded like she was offering a flashlight before I had asked. I left her office with papers in a neat stack and 3 errands in my phone. Bank, accountant, safe deposit box. At First Harbor Bank, I asked to see the manager. Tom Hatcher has known me 20 years. He met me at the door of his office and asked about the fishing trip we never took last year. I told him we would reschedule and then asked for a private meeting about account security. I did not offer details. I handed him the letter Miriam drafted, and my ID. I would like multi-factor verification required for any transaction above a minimal threshold, I said. I would like to freeze new joint credit applications, and I would like in-person verification for any change to beneficiaries or pay-on-death designations. He read the letter and nodded. We can do that. He did not ask why. He knows the way a person sits when they have decided to build a wall rather than start a fight. We were nearly finished when he said something I will remember for a long time. You have always been straightforward with us, Colin. I can be straightforward with you. You are not the first man to sit in that chair with this tilt in his shoulders. The people who do best walk slowly and document everything. Walk slowly and document everything felt like a prayer I could say without thinking about theology. At the accountant's, I brought the envelopes I'd prepared and the request letter Miriam wrote. Sarah Patel has handled the store books for a decade and always treats our money like it belongs to a future we have not met yet. She looked at the documents and said we can do a preservation audit in 3 days if you want it rushed. It will. Catalogue current assets, account for recurring obligations, and demonstrate that any freezes are maintenance, not manipulation. She pushed her glasses up her nose and added, I will need read-only access to any accounts Elaine has been able to view. That sentence stung for reasons separate from numbers. I gave her what she asked for anyway. At the safe deposit box, I placed the flash drive, the second set of photos, and a sealed letter to myself with a brief summary of what I heard and when I heard it. I stood in the quiet little room with the grey carpet and the metal cabinets and felt gratitude for dull places that hold sharp moments carefully. By lunch, my list had more check marks than blanks. I pulled into the lot behind my flagship store and sat for a minute watching customers push carts of soil and lattice through the sliding doors. Inside, the smell of lumber and fertilizer hit me with a small relief I had not expected. Work has a smell that keeps your feet on the ground. I walked the aisles like I always do, noting the empty pegs that need restock and the teenager at the register who still counts change out loud. Marla, our assistant manager, waved me over and asked if I had a second. She wanted approval to send flowers to an employee's mother who had surgery. Yes, I said, send something cheerful and write the card from the whole team. Doing one decent thing in the middle of a private storm felt like an anchor. Back in the car, a text from Elaine waited. Are you coming home for dinner, or should I plan something with friends? The words made a shape I knew well. I typed that I had a long afternoon and might be late. She replied with a heart, then another message that said, be safe. My thumb hovered above the screen longer than it should have. At 3, I drove to Claire's office and sat across the street for 10 minutes, like a man checking a roofline for weak points. I did not go in. I am her father, not her client. I did not want her to learn what I knew from a man standing in a doorway holding a grenade. I sent her a message instead. Dinner tomorrow on me if you are free. She wrote back in less than a minute. Would not miss it, Dad. That line sat warm in my shirt pocket until the evening. At home, the house felt careful. Elaine had set 2 place settings and left a note that said she was meeting a friend for a quick drink and would be back by 8. There was a smiley face at the end of the sentence, like salt sprinkled on a wound. I warmed the soup she left on the stove and ate standing at the counter because chairs felt like a luxury. After, I took the trash out and stood by the bin longer than necessary. The neighborhood was the kind of quiet that makes you hear the electricity in the street lamps. When she returned, she called my name from the hallway and asked how my day had gone. I said, steady. She kissed my cheek and told me she was going to watch something in the den. We shared a roof and different weather systems. On her way down the hall, her phone lit up. A name flashed and disappeared before I could read it fully. I did not chase a ghost. I went to my office and locked the door. I opened my notebook and wrote the day's log in block letters. Meeting with counsel. Bank holds placed. Accountant engaged. Safe deposit box updated. No confrontations, no accusations. Maintain ordinary household expenditures. Then I opened a new page and wrote a heading that felt like a hand on my shoulder. What I will say if Claire asks. The list that followed was short. I will tell her what I heard. I will show her what I can prove. I will not tell her how to feel. I will not ask her to take sides. I will answer the questions she asks, and only those. At 7:40, an email arrived from Miriam with attachments labeled Preservation Notice and Interim Protocols. She had already drafted letters to counsel for service, if needed, and a simple script for bank personnel explaining verification holds as standard security. She added one line at the end that made me breathe easier than I had all day. You are doing this right. Keep moving at this pace. I printed the letters and slid them into a clean folder. On the way back from the printer, I passed the hall where the carrot photo hangs. I let myself look at it this time. Claire with the too big apron, tongue between her teeth. Elaine laughing with her eyes closed. I felt the grief and did not push it away. Grief is a witness, not a judge. Around 9, the house settled into its nightly sounds. The refrigerator hum, the soft tick of the baseboard heater, a car far away. I shut the office light and stepped into the darker hall. Elaine's voice floated from the den in that bright tone she uses when she is on the phone with friends. I could not hear the words, only the lift and fall. For a second I imagined she was saying something simple about a recipe or a sale on towels. It is a habit of mine to give people benign sentences when I cannot hear their real ones. In the guest room, I laid the notebook and the folder on the nightstand and set an alarm for early again. I turned off the lamp and let the room become a shape I recognized. The phone vibrated once with a new message. I did not reach for it. Some nights, the wisest thing you can do is let the device glow and fade without you. I closed my eyes and saw a window and a narrow gap in the curtains, and the way truth sometimes arrives, dressed in someone else's voice. I told myself the next day would ask for the same steady hands and the same slow steps. Then, just as sleep began to approach, a sound slipped into the house that did not belong to any of our routines. A car door outside, footsteps on gravel. The doorbell rang once, polite and firm, and left its echo in every room. The doorbell's chime lingered through the halls like an unwelcome echo. I stood in the darkened guest room, heart steady but alert, listening for the second ring that never came. Elaine's voice drifted faintly from the den, still high and social, a laugh at the end of a sentence. She hadn't heard it, or she chose not to. I pulled on my jacket, slipped the phone into my pocket, and walked softly down the stairs. At the front window, I tilted the blinds just enough to see the porch. A figure stood there, backlit by the street lamp. Broad shoulders, a cap pulled low, not a neighbor. Too still, too deliberate. The man shifted, glanced toward the driveway, then toward the window as if sensing eyes. I let the blind fall and waited another beat. A light knock followed, softer than the bell. Whoever it was did not intend to cause a scene. I opened the door only part way, the chain still across. "Evening," I said quietly. "Mr. Cole?" The voice was low, professional. "Mike Rodriguez. I was asked to stop by. I knew the name. A private investigator recommended years ago by a supplier when a warehouse break-in left questions unanswered. I hadn't called him this time, which meant someone else had. What is this about?" He lifted a small envelope just high enough for me to see. "Information I thought you'd want. Better hand it off in person." I unlatched the chain, opened the door wider, and stepped onto the porch. The night air carried a damp chill, the kind that settles in your collar. Elaine's laugh echoed again from the den, muffled by distance. "Who asked you to come?" I kept my tone flat. "Mutual acquaintance. Said you'd need another set of eyes soon. Consider this a courtesy call. No charge." His words carried the precision of someone who knew how to tread carefully. He passed me the envelope, tipped his cap, and walked away without waiting for a reply. His car, a nondescript sedan, pulled from the curb and faded into the dark like it had been staged. Back inside, I locked the door and carried the envelope to my office. Elaine called my name once, casual, but I told her I was finishing paperwork. She didn't press. The envelope held photographs, grainy, taken at a distance, but clear enough. Elaine and Victor at a cafe 2 towns over, heads bent together, papers spread between them, dates scribbled at the corner of each print, 3 weeks back, 2 months back, even one from last fall. The manila folder I'd seen on Victor's table appeared in 2 of them. Another showed Elaine at a teller's window, signing what looked like forms. I laid them out across the desk, each photo another nail driven quietly into wood. Proof layered on proof. It struck me that while Elaine laughed in the den, her image on glossy paper sat cold under my lamp. I slipped the photos into a file and added the date. Then I wrote one line in my notebook. Not alone in this anymore. Sleep came late and shallow, but the alarm still dragged me up before dawn. The house smelled faintly of Elaine's perfume, lingering like smoke after a fire. I dressed, made coffee, and reviewed the photos again in silence. By 9, I was at Miriam's office. She studied the photographs without expression, only the quiet focus of someone sorting puzzle pieces. These, she said finally, corroborate the recording. Independent surveillance carries weight, keep them secure. And Colin, be careful who you let know you have them. I didn't hire him, I told her. That makes him cautious. It also makes him dangerous if his loyalty shifts. For now, treat this as intelligence, not evidence. Use it to guide, not to strike. She drafted another memo, this one formalizing my preservation actions into a timeline with signatures. She said documentation is your shield. The louder they accuse, the calmer you need to appear. When I left her office, my phone buzzed. A message from Claire. Lunch today, if you're free. Need to ask you something. I typed back. Name the place. She sent the address of a small cafe near her office. The cafe was half full when I arrived, sunlight pooling across mismatched tables. Claire waved me over, her face bright but her eyes searching. She hugged me longer than usual, then pulled me down into the seat across from her. Dad, she began, has Mom seemed different to you lately? The words almost broke through my composure, but I kept my hand steady on the mug. In what way? I asked. Secretive, distracted. I catch her whispering on calls. And Victor, she trailed off, fiddling with her spoon. He keeps asking me about your company, structures, partnerships, who owns what. He frames it like curiosity, but it feels off. Her eyes lifted to mine, sharp with her training. Is there something going on? I thought of Miriam's advice. Clean facts, no speeches. I reached into my jacket, pulled the notebook, and flipped to a blank page. I wrote one sentence. You need to hear something. Then I slid the phone across the table, opened to the recording, and pressed play. Claire listened, her posture straightening, her hands tightening around the mug. She didn't speak for the first 2 minutes, or the next 5. When Elaine's voice drifted out, cold and dismissive, her lips parted, but no words came. When Victor's lawyer tone calculated timelines, her jaw set hard. At the 15-minute mark, I stopped it. Her eyes glistened, but no tears fell. You've known since Tuesday? Yes. And you're planning? Yes. She sat back, exhaled, and pressed her palm flat against the table, as though grounding herself. She asked me last night to watch you, to tell her if you seemed paranoid. She framed it like concern, but she shook her head. I thought maybe I was overthinking. You weren't. Claire's shoulders trembled once, then steadied. I can't believe her voice cracked and then hardened. No, I can believe it. I've seen the signs. I just didn't want to put them together. I reached for her hand, but she pulled it back, not out of rejection, but out of resolve. Dad, you need to know Victor has debts. Serious ones. He talks in his sleep sometimes. Student loans, firm lease, even something about bar complaints. He thinks I don't hear, but I do. He's not stable. That aligned with the fragments. Miriam and I suspected. I nodded once. Thank you for telling me. She leaned forward. What are you going to do? I answered the only way I could. Protect what's ours and keep you out of it as much as I can. Claire's lips pressed into a line. You won't keep me out of it. He's my husband. Or he was. Now he's something else. And she's still my mother? We sat in silence a long moment. Then she whispered, I need to think, but I'm on your side. The words settled into me like a stone in a river, weighty but steadying. When I got home that evening, Elaine was waiting in the kitchen. Her smile was wide, practiced. How was your day? She asked, leaning on the counter like nothing in. The world had shifted. Steady, I said. Her eyes lingered on me a moment too long, as though searching for cracks. Then she laughed lightly, changed the subject to groceries, and began chopping vegetables with the ease of someone rehearsing normal. I moved through the motions of the evening with her, listening to the rhythm of the knife, the clink of plates, the hum of ordinary life built on a fault line. But when I stepped into my office later, the folder of photographs waited, the notebook waited, and the recording waited. And for the first time since Tuesday, I no longer felt alone in the dark. The house had grown quieter in ways I could not measure. Elaine moved through the rooms with the same deliberate grace she always had, but there was a tension beneath her steps, like an actor aware the audience was watching too closely. I heard it in the clipped rhythm of her heels, in the way she lingered at mirrors a beat longer, as though rehearsing a part she did not fully trust. I matched her calm with my own. We shared meals, spoke about ordinary things, groceries, landscaping, Claire's schedule, each of us pretending nothing shifted, but under the surface, everything had. On Thursday morning, Elaine announced she was meeting her bridge group at the club. She dressed with particular care, hair pinned neatly, perfume faint but deliberate. At the door, she kissed my cheek, her eyes flicking sideways as though gauging my reaction. I smiled, wished her a good afternoon, and watched her car disappear down the street. As soon as she turned the corner, I retrieved the file of photographs Rodriguez had delivered. I spread them across the desk again. Elaine at the cafe, Victor leaning in, the folder between them. Each image had a timestamp, a quiet betrayal, frozen in place. I snapped digital copies and secured them with the rest of my growing archive. Then I turned to the preservation audit Sarah Patel was preparing. She had sent preliminary notes the night before, outlining which accounts had unusual activity. One in particular stood out, 42,000 transferred over 6 months to an account I had never opened. The beneficiary name was Victor's. It confirmed what Claire suspected, what I had begun to see. Elaine wasn't just planning. She was already feeding him piece by piece. I called Miriam and updated her. She told me to print everything, to let Sarah finish the audit, and to hold steady. Her words carried the same steady rhythm they had on the first day. Document, preserve, don't accuse. By the time Elaine returned that evening, smiling wide with shopping bags in hand, my office safe had grown heavier with evidence. She laid her purchases on the counter, spoke cheerfully about a sale on linens, and asked what I'd done with my day. Paperwork, I said, and she laughed lightly as though the word bored her. That night, after she fell asleep in the bedroom, I sat in the guest room, phone in hand, scrolling through the photos again. Each image was another layer on the wall I was building between us. I thought about the girl she once was, laughing at my clumsy jokes in a diner when money was thin. I thought about the woman she was now, counting every dollar I earned like it was a rung on a ladder out of our marriage. The contrast sat heavy, but I did not let it crush me. Instead, I opened the notebook and wrote, "She builds her front. I build my case." The escalation came on Friday. Victor called my cell, his number flashing bold across the screen. He rarely contacted me directly. Our conversations usually ran through Claire or through casual family dinners. But his voice, when I answered, carried the smoothness of a man who thought he was still in control. "Colin," he said warmly. "Wanted to check in. Claire mentioned you've been a little distracted lately. Everything all right?" The words weren't casual. They were probes, subtle attempts to measure my footing. "I'm steady," I replied. "That's good. You've got a lot on your plate after all. Business, family, not easy keeping it all balanced." He chuckled softly, as though sharing a private joke. "If you ever need help, you know I'm here. Legal issues, contracts, whatever. You can trust me." Trust. The word nearly caught in my throat. But I kept my tone even. "I'll keep that in mind." He lingered another moment, then ended the call with forced warmth. I sat staring at the phone long after the line went dead. He was testing the waters. He wanted to know if I had seen the cracks. That evening, Elaine hosted 2 friends in the living room. Their voices floated down the hall, bright and cheerful. I caught fragments, talk of vacations, sales at the mall, upcoming charity events. Elaine laughed easily, poured wine, played the role of the perfect wife in her perfect home. But when I stepped into the room to refill my glass, her smile faltered for a fraction of a second. Her friends didn't notice, but I did. That flicker told me she felt the pressure too. Later, when the guests had gone and the dishes were washed, Elaine sat beside me on the couch. She leaned against my shoulder, the way she had 100 times before, and asked if everything was all right at work. Her tone was soft, curious, probing. "Everything's steady," I said again. She kissed my cheek and murmured something about how lucky we were. Then she slipped away to bed, leaving me with the hollow echo of words that no longer meant anything. The weekend brought more layers to her front. She dressed carefully each morning, made calls in the garden where she thought I couldn't hear, and filled our calendar with social obligations. To the outside world, she played the picture of contentment. But I saw the tension in her eyes when she thought no one was watching. On Sunday afternoon, I received another envelope at the office. No name on the outside, just slid under the door. Inside were copies of financial statements I hadn't seen before. Victor's firm expenses, overdue balances, even a letter from the Bar Association about a pending inquiry. His debts were worse than Claire had realized. He wasn't just reckless, he was drowning. I tucked the envelope into the safe and noted the date. Whoever was feeding me this information wanted me armed. For now, I let it come. That evening, Claire called. Her voice carried a tightness I recognized. "Dad," she said, "Victor asked me again about your partnerships. He framed it as curiosity, but I think he's fishing for leverage. I told him I didn't know and changed the subject, but he's pressing harder. You need to be careful." I thanked her, told her she was right to deflect, and promised we would talk more soon. Her voice softened. "I'm with you in this. Don't forget that." After the call, I sat in the office with the door locked. The photos, the audit notes, and the new envelope spread out before me. Piece by piece, the puzzle was coming into focus. Elaine building her social shield, Victor pressing his legal edge, Claire caught between but leaning toward truth. I wrote one more heading in the notebook. They escalate in public. I escalate in silence. As the night settled around the house, I closed the safe, turned the key, and felt something steady inside me. They thought their performance would corner me. They didn't understand that every laugh, every social smile, every probing call was another line added to my file. The game was shifting, and they didn't see it yet. Monday began with polite weather and sharper smiles. Elaine moved through the kitchen like a woman auditioning for a part she already held. She brewed tea she did not drink, arranged fruit she did not eat, and asked how I slept with a softness designed for witnesses. I said I slept fine. It was close enough to true. By 9 she had changed outfits twice. The second dress was the one she wears when she wants people to take her seriously. Dark, tailored, pearls small enough to whisper restraint. She said she had errands and a committee meeting. She left the details vague, the way people do when the details would fail inspection. The front door clicked with the care of someone closing a glass cabinet. I walked my usual lap through the house, not to snoop, just to steady. The calendar on the corkboard had a new block in her handwriting, penciled light, and then traced over. Sycamore, 2 p.m. I knew that building. Not a committee room, a boutique law firm upstairs from a tailor who could fix anything except character. I wrote the word Sycamore in my notebook and let it be what it was. Claire texted at 10. She said Victor wanted to have dinner as a family tomorrow and thought we should all talk about plans. The word plans did not bother to hide its bones. I asked how she felt about it. She responded that she wanted truth more than theatre and would tell me where and when once she set the table. To her advantage. Then she added a heart and told me to eat something. At 11, Miriam called with the steady cadence I had come to lean on. She said the preservation audit would be ready mid-week, that Sarah had already flagged 2 transfers from a household account to a secondary savings with an unfamiliar title. She said we would request records through proper channels, not accusations. She said she was drafting a notice of intent to preserve the marital estate, the kind of document that reads dull until it saves your life. It would go out the moment Elaine retained counsel or the moment we had a name to send it to, whichever came first. I thanked her and told her about the penciled word on the calendar. She hummed once in acknowledgement and said to photograph it, with the day's date visible. Not to trap, just to fix memory. She reminded me that ordinary details become evidence when people insist they were somewhere else. Around noon, I drove to the flagship store. I wanted the smell of lumber and the comfort of straight lines stacked on shelves. Marla met me at the service desk with a list of small problems. A pallet of soil that had split, a new hire who needed an apron, a customer who wanted to return a hose that had obviously met a lawnmower. It felt good to say yes to the first 2 and offer a fair exchange on the third. Clean problems reward clean answers. Back at the office, an email from Victor waited. The subject line was friendly in that professional way. Quick estate planning. Question. He wrote that he was helping Claire think about the future and would appreciate a convenient time to review a consolidated list of my assets so he could advise us on best practices. He said the word advise, like a man reaching for a rung that was not there. I forwarded the email to Miriam. She replied with a short draft I could use if I chose to respond. It said that all inquiries regarding finances should be directed to counsel, that I was updating records as part of a standard review, and that I would not be sharing sensitive information outside appropriate channels. She added a second sentence that did not read like a threat, but would feel like one to the right reader. Please preserve all communications and financial records relevant to any contemplated legal action. I sent it as written. I pictured Victor's mouth going thin. Elaine. Returned at 4, hair neat, lipstick intact, eyes a shade too bright. She set her bag down, asked about my day, and mentioned she might meet a friend for a walk after dinner if the weather held. She glanced at the corkboard without turning her head. The pencil mark had already done its work. In the den, after she went upstairs to change, my phone buzzed with a number I recognized from the envelope on the porch. Rodriguez again. He did not waste time. He said Victor had been to a private lender in an office above a car lot 2 towns over. He said the conversation had not gone well. He said the lender had asked for collateral and Victor had said words defenders say when they are out of rope. He also said Elaine had met a woman on Sycamore who carries a leather portfolio embossed with initials that match a divorce litigator who enjoys being quoted. He spoke plainly, without drama. I wrote down what I needed and told him this was enough for now. Claire called at 7. She sounded tired in the way people do when their minds have been running all day. She said Victor had asked her to sign a simple form to streamline household money. He had called it a harmless power of attorney for efficiency, something that would make bill paying easier. She said she told him she wanted to wait and talk to me first. She laughed once without humor and said he had not liked that answer. I told her she did well. I told her to sign nothing she had not sat with for days, nothing she did not understand, alone in a quiet room. I told her I was proud of her. She was quiet a moment and then said she did not like feeling like an investigator in her own marriage. I said neither did I. The next morning dawned with the flat light that makes everything look honest whether it is or not. Elaine dressed in exercise clothes and said she was meeting Nina for a walk. She mentioned Nina twice, as if invoking a saint. To bless an alibi, I said to enjoy the air. When the front door closed, I checked the calendar. Today had a new pencil mark. Lunch, town centre. It wanted to be harmless. It was not. I drove to town for my own errand and happened to pass the big windows of the Heritage Society Cafe at the same time 2 figures stood to leave. From across the street, they were shapes. Elaine, the embossed portfolio woman, a handshake. That lasted. I did not slow. I did not stare. I kept driving and let the moment write itself in the notebook later with the time and the weather and the color of the coat she wore. Back home, Sarah's preliminary audit hit my inbox. The numbers sat there like a polite alarm. Small transfers adding up. 2 boutique purchases that did not match any card I recognized. A wire request, initiated then cancelled the day the bank placed verification holds. I replied with thanks and a request that she prepare a simple visual timeline of activity side by side with household events. Not to accuse, to understand. By afternoon, the phone began its small campaign. An unknown number left a message about opportunities to refinance. Another number asked if I had considered the advantages of moving investment assets for better yield. I recognized the cadence of phishing. I did not bite. At 3, Victor texted Claire that he had made dinner reservations for the 4 of us at a place that serves meals under dim lights to make conversation feel expensive. Claire forwarded the message and asked if I was willing. I told her I would go if she wanted me there. She said she did. She said she needed a table where the light was not flattering. Before dinner, I stopped by Miriam's office to sign the notice she had drafted. It did not accuse anyone of anything. It simply said that both parties were expected to maintain the status quo, to refrain from dissipating assets, to preserve accounts and records. It read like a traffic sign. Its power came from being there when someone decided to run the light. Restaurant greeted us with soft music and a host who remembered faces for a living. Claire arrived first and hugged me with a steadiness I will not forget. Elaine and Victor walked in 2 minutes later as if timed to prove coordination. He smiled too much. She smiled just enough. The waiter poured water. Menus opened. Victor said he was happy we could all sit down like adults and talk about the future. He laid a leather portfolio on the table and rested his palm on it like a promise. He began to speak about estate planning and efficiencies and how families thrive when communication flows through a central point. He said he would be honored to help shepherd that. He used the word shepherd without irony. I listened without interrupting and felt the old patience I learned in supply chain meetings fold itself around me. When he asked for a broad overview of my holdings so he could advise intelligently, I said I had engaged counsel for that purpose and all questions should go there. His smile did not change shape, but it stopped being real. Elaine shifted tactics. She said this could all be so much easier if I stopped making things difficult, if I trusted the people closest to me, if I remembered that marriage is built on openness. Claire stared at her glass and said nothing. I said that openness is measured in actions, not speeches, and that I was committed to handling our affairs responsibly. The table sat with that sentence like it had splinters. Victor leaned back and tried a new angle. He said he had heard that small business owners sometimes hide money in complicated structures as a hedge, and that this caused trouble later if not disclosed. He said he hoped that was not the case here because he would hate to see misunderstandings in court. The last word did not belong at dinner. He had put it there anyway. I let the silence do the work for a heartbeat. Then I said I was preserving what I had built and could account for every line. I said that any attempt to move money around right now would be a mistake for anyone involved. I said that if there were misunderstandings, the cleanest way to fix them was in daylight with documents. Claire lifted her eyes then, and there was something like relief in them. Dessert was declined by everyone except the table behind us, where two teenagers split a brownie. We stood to leave. Victor extended his hand as if we had agreed on something. I shook it because I shake hands with men who think they are winning. It keeps them talking. On the sidewalk, Claire hugged me hard and walked to her car without looking. Back, Elaine adjusted her scarf and said we would all feel better after a good night's sleep. Victor told me to think about his offer. The word offer hung in the air like a coupon with an expiration date. I drove home slowly and parked under the maple. The porch light turned itself on like always. Inside, the answering machine flashed an old-fashioned red number, the kind of detail people forget still exists. One message. I pressed play. A calm voice said they were calling from the bank's fraud department to confirm an attempted change to a beneficiary designation on a household account. The timestamp aligned with the window between lunch and dinner. The attempt had failed because of the holds and verification requirements. They wanted to confirm whether I had authorized anyone to act for me. They would need me to stop by in person in the morning. I stood in the kitchen with that small, measured voice still in the air. In the den, Elaine set her bag on the chair and said she was going to make tea. In the hallway, the clock ticked as if keeping score. My phone vibrated with a text from a number I did not have saved. It said this only: check your porch. I opened the door and looked down. A single manila envelope lay on the mat. No name, just thick with paper. Behind me, another phone began to ring in the house, not mine. A different tone, sharp and insistent, coming from the den where Elaine had left her bag unzipped. I stared at the envelope, then at the glow from the den, and felt the floor tilt a fraction under my feet as both sounds held at once. I stood with the door half open and the cold on my hands. The envelope on the mat looked ordinary. The sound from the den did not. Elaine's phone kept ringing in that bright tone she uses for friends. I let it ring. I bent, lifted the envelope, and felt the weight of paper shift inside. I shut the door. The porch light clicked off behind me, and the house was itself again. In the office, I locked the door and set the envelope on the desk. I did not rush. I wrote the time in my notebook and the small detail that the paper smelled like copy toner and coffee. These things help later when you doubt your own memory. I slid a finger under the seal and opened it clean. Inside were photocopies and a single USB stick in a clear sleeve. The top page showed letterhead I recognized from the Sycamore building, a retainer acknowledgement with a date from this week. The name on the line matched the embossed initials on the leather portfolio I had seen at lunch. The second page was a draft petition. It used language that has learned how to be cruel without raising its voice. It spoke about irreconcilable differences and a need for immediate support. It listed assets with a confidence that did not belong to the writer. At the back of the stack sat a beneficiary change form for one of our household accounts. Typed. Entries filled the boxes. My name was there. So was hers. The signature line for me was blank. I took a breath and let it out slow. I photographed each page with the date visible on a small desk calendar. I wrote a short summary and emailed it to myself with the photos attached. Subject line said, porch packet. Chain of custody is not a phrase that belongs in a family home. But the house had not asked my opinion. The USB held a single audio file. I did not play it yet. I labeled it by date and made 2 copies to the drives in the safe. I would let Miriam decide whether we needed a forensic mirror. Then I locked the original stick away. Down the hall, the ringing stopped. A few minutes later, I heard the soft slide of a zipper and the click of a bag clasp. Elaine walked past the office on quiet feet and asked if I had gotten the mail. I said it was all on the table. She said thanks, in a voice that tried to be careless. I waited until her steps faded and then turned off the light. Sleep came in thin strips and snapped when the alarm went off. By 8, I was at First Harbour Bank with a folder under my arm. The fraud officer led me to a small room with a glass wall and a view of a copier that never seemed to rest. Her name tag said Larson. She had the calm that comes from seeing most things twice. She asked me to confirm the message they had left about the attempted change. I told her I had not authorized anyone to act for me. She pulled up a screen and said the attempt had been made online, failed the challenge questions, and triggered a hold I had requested last week. She said there had been another attempt in person 2 days ago. A teller had followed policy and asked for both parties. The customer left. Ms. Larson did not use names. She did not need to. I asked for an incident report, and she printed one with a case number and the dates and the times. I signed a statement that said I had not requested any change. I asked for alerts on any inquiry that touched beneficiaries or transfers. She set them up and asked if I wanted dual signatures required for any future change on household accounts. I said yes. She asked if I wanted camera footage preserved for the window they had logged. I asked her to hold it pending counsel request. She nodded and wrote down the timestamps. Before I left, she folded her hands and said a sentence that carried more comfort than she probably meant to give. Preserve and verify. That is how you keep a bad day from becoming a worse one. I thanked her and walked out with a folder that felt heavier than paper. In the car, I called Miriam and read the case number. I told her about the sycamore letterhead and the draft petition and the form with the blank line where my name should have been. She said to drop copies with her assistant and not to carry the originals unless needed. She said she would send a preservation demand to the bank and a notice to the sycamore firm. She said the words spoliation and status quo like a doctor, saying there is a treatment for this if you start now. Back at the office above the bakery, she scanned the copies and slid me a receipt with initials and the time. She handled the USB like it might break. She said we would not play it yet. She said independent corroboration is better than drama. She drafted a short letter on clean paper. It was not angry. It was exact. It said counsel had been retained. It said any action touching the marital estate must cease. It said all records should be preserved. It listed the bank case number and the account-ending digits. It asked the firm to reply with confirmation of their client representation. It read like daylight. She sent it certified. On the way to the parking lot, my phone buzzed with a text from Claire. She said Victor had left the office early and had packed files in a hurry. She said he had snapped at a paralegal and then smiled too broadly at a client. She said she was staying with a friend that night because she did not want to sit under the same roof and pretend calm. She said she would see me tomorrow. I told her that was wise. I told her I loved her and left it at that. At home, the kitchen smelled like lemon cleaner and something warming on the stove. Elaine stood by the sink, sleeves rolled, hair pinned. She looked like the life we had built together. She also looked like someone waiting for news that had already arrived. She asked how my morning went, and I said steady. She asked if I had stopped by the bank, and I said they had asked me to sign some verification forms. She stirred the pot too fast, and a thin line of soup slipped over the rim and ran down the side. She did not wipe it. Her phone buzzed on the counter. The name on the screen lit and went dark before I could read it. She turned the phone face down and asked if I wanted bread. After lunch, I went to the office and played the audio from the USB through a headset. It was a conversation recorded outdoors. Wind moved in the mic now and then. The voices were clear enough. Elaine and the Sycamore attorney. They discussed timing and filings and a narrative about my supposed control over finances. The other voice warned her that courts like evidence, not tales. Elaine said she could tell the story in a way that would land. The attorney said to keep her story tight. They laughed once in unison in a way that sounded like choreography. I closed my eyes and listened a second time. I took notes. I marked the moments that tied to dates I could prove. I stopped the audio and sat still until my hands knew their own weight again. Then I wrote an index by minute marks. I saved it. I sent Miriam the index and not the audio. She replied with one line, "This will do." An hour later, the bank called to confirm receipt of the preservation request from counsel and to say the footage was tagged for hold. They gave me a contact name in security and a number that began with an extension I had not used before. I wrote it in the notebook and underlined it twice. The house shifted toward late afternoon. Light thinned. The maple shadow reached across the lawn. Elaine moved through the rooms with new stillness. She paused at the corkboard for a beat too long. She glanced at my office door and then away, like a swimmer eyeing a current. When my phone buzzed, she looked up. When hers buzzed, she did not. Near 5, a courier arrived and asked for a signature. The envelope had Miriam's letter inside and a second one addressed to counsel at Sycamore. Elaine opened the door before I reached it. She signed for both and carried them to the dining table. She read the first page and set it down at a right angle, like it might move if she did not pin it with precision. She did not speak. She folded the paper and slid it back into the envelope with a care that did not match the force running through her hands. She asked what this was, and I said it was a notice asking both of us to preserve what we had. She asked if I thought this was necessary. I said I thought daylight always was. She said I was being dramatic. I said I was being careful. Her eyes flashed, then softened. She said she had a headache. She said she would lie down. She did not mention Sycamore after she left the room. I sat with the silence. Then I took the porch envelope copies and labeled a file by the counsel name. I added the bank incident report and the case number and the camera time stamps. I printed the calendar photo with the penciled Sycamore. I tucked all of it into a red folder. I placed the red folder on the top left shelf in the safe where I put things I need to reach fast. At dusk, I stepped outside and stood by the rail where the paint always fades first. The street was quiet. A car rolled past, slow, and did not stop. The air smelled like damp earth and the inside of a lumber store. I thought about ordinary days and how they hold you steady when the hard ones try to lift your feet. Back inside the den lamp threw a narrow cone on the rug. Elaine sat on the couch, staring at nothing, in a way that looked practiced. She asked if I wanted to watch something. I said I had work. She said I was always working now. I said that was one way to say it. She did not smile. My phone buzzed near. 9. A message from the fraud officer said they had logged another attempt to access a balance through an online portal, blocked by the holds. The time matched a window when I had stepped onto the porch. I texted thanks and asked for the IP log to be preserved. She said counsel could request it. One more line in a ledger that was beginning to speak for itself. Claire sent a photo a few minutes later. A single page Victor had asked her to sign. It was a statement wrapped in concern. It said she was worried about my mental state and thought someone should help me manage finances. It had a blank line at the bottom for her name. She had drawn a diagonal line across it with a pen. She wrote that she had told him no and that she was staying at her friend's apartment. She wrote that she would see me tomorrow afternoon. I told her I would meet her where she chose. Close to 10, Elaine walked into the office doorway and rested a hand on the frame like she had always done when she wanted kindness to come before questions. She said she was worried about me. She said I looked tired. She said maybe we should take a short trip and reset, somewhere quiet where phones do not ring. Her voice tried to float the idea like a small boat. I let it drift. I said I had meetings this week and could not travel. She nodded and stared at the carpet as if it could offer her a different answer. When she left, I turned off the light and sat with the dark for a while. A few minutes later, I heard her in the den again. The tone of her phone changed to a low vibration she uses when she wants privacy. She spoke in a whisper at first, then a tone that carries shape even when you cannot hear the words. I did not move closer. I did not need to. Near midnight, I checked the locks and the windows and the safe. I set the red folder where my hand could find it without light. I put the phone on the nightstand and face down. I lay back and drew a breath that reached the bottom of my lungs for the first time all day, just as sleep began to thin the edges. Of the room, headlights swept across the ceiling and stalled. A car idled at the curb, longer than a drop-off would need. The engine cut, and the night went flat. A figure moved past the hedge, and the bell did not ring. A soft knock came at the side door instead, the one that opens near the office. Then a single text darkened the screen on my nightstand. "Check the video from window 3. The knock at the side door was softer than the bell, but sharper in intent. It came in a rhythm that knew I was awake. The text still glowed on the nightstand. "Check the video from window 3. I rose without turning on the light. The hall carried every sound like water down a pipe. Elaine's door was closed. No movement inside, no whisper, no creak. At the office, I keyed in the code and opened the monitor array. 4 windows showed the yard. Number 3 looked down over the side porch where the knock had come. The night vision painted everything in pale grey. The figure stood close to the frame, careful not to expose a face. A cap pulled low. A jacket zipped high. One hand in the pocket, the other raised once to tap the door again. Patient, then the figure leaned closer, pulled something from the jacket, and held it to the lens. A flash of paper, large block letters written with a marker. "Camera has blind. Spot. Check mailbox tomorrow." The figure tucked the note back, turned, and walked away with unhurried steps. The car engine started without headlights and rolled off. I rewound the footage and froze the frame where the paper filled most of the view. Not all of it was visible, but enough. Blind spot. Mailbox. Tomorrow. I saved 3 stills, logged the time, and wrote the note in my book. Sleep didn't return, so I sat in the guest room with the lamp low. The house breathed its ordinary creaks and sighs. At 4 a.m., Elaine's door opened. I heard her walk down the hall, the soft pad of bare feet on carpet, the faint splash of water in the bathroom sink. She didn't come near my room. When morning came, I shaved, dressed, and went downstairs. Elaine was at the counter in her robe, stirring oatmeal with the calmness of someone who wanted to erase the previous day. She asked if I'd slept. I said, lightly. She nodded as though she understood. At 8, I drove to the bank, stopped at the P.O. boxes outside, and opened ours. Mail lay stacked but ordinary. Bills, a flyer, a magazine she never reads. Nothing else. I closed it, checked the street, and drove back. At our home mailbox, the flag hung down, but inside was a manila envelope. Thin, folded once. No address. No stamp, just slipped in like someone walking past. In the office, I opened it carefully. Inside were 3 pages of typed transcript. The heading read, "Meeting, Sycamore Office, Notes Recorded." The lines were clipped shorthand, but clear. Elaine's name, Victor's name, the attorney's initials, talk of acceleration, filing early, pressing narrative of control, specific. Phrases jumped out. Paint him as manipulative with finances. Daughter's testimony could support psychological abuse narrative. Bank holds confirm his paranoia. Use it. The pages ended with a signature block left blank. Whoever transcribed this hadn't finished, or hadn't wanted to. I called Miriam and read the highlights. She went quiet, then asked if I could drop them with her before noon. I did. She examined them under a lamp, tapping the edge with her pen. "Colin," she said evenly, "if this is authentic, it's not just preparation. It's a strategy document. We'll preserve it, but don't let Elaine know you've seen it." I left the originals with her and returned home. Elaine was dressed when I walked in, casual but polished. She said she was meeting a friend for coffee. She asked if I needed anything from town. I said no. She smiled a little too wide and left. An hour later, Claire called. Her voice carried the weight of someone who had made a decision overnight. "Dad," she said, "I can't stay with him. I packed a bag and I'm moving into a sublet downtown. It's not permanent, but it's mine. I'll tell him tonight." I listened without interrupting. She went on. "He asked me again about your finances. This time he was sharp, not curious, demanding. When I said I didn't know, he accused me of keeping secrets for you. I don't know what he thinks he's building, but it's dangerous. I can't be part of it." I told her she was right, and that I was proud of her for seeing it clean. I said we'd meet later in the week and talk through what she needed. She thanked me, then paused. "Be careful, Dad. He's unraveling." The afternoon stretched quiet. Elaine returned with shopping bags, set them on the counter and hummed to herself while unpacking. Her phone buzzed twice, screen flashing names I didn't recognize. She silenced it quickly. After dinner, she moved through the house with unusual energy, rearranging drawers, folding blankets, making calls in a bright tone. It had the feel of a woman building proof of normal life. I sat in the office with the door open, writing in the notebook. My pen moved across the page without pause. The word acceleration came back to me from the transcript. They were running out of time. They were pushing harder. At 9, the phone rang, the landline no one uses anymore. I answered. A calm voice asked if I was Mr. Cole. When I confirmed, the caller said they were conducting a verification regarding a pending petition. The words were careful, scripted. I asked which court. They repeated only that a filing was being processed. Then they hung up. I sat with the silence after, the dial tone flat in my ear. A filing. Perhaps the draft had already left Sycamore. At 10, Elaine came into the office doorway. She wore a soft smile, hair let down, eyes shaded. She asked if we could talk. I gestured to the chair. She sat. She began slowly, voice quiet. "We've been under strain. I know it, you know it. Maybe we've both made mistakes. But don't you think we could start fresh? A trip, a reset, just us, before lawyers get involved, before it gets ugly." Her tone carried the shape of concern, but underneath was urgency. It was not reconciliation she was offering. It was delay. I kept my voice even. "Elaine, I'm protecting what I built. That's not ugliness, that's responsibility." Her smile slipped, just for a second, then returned. "I'm worried about you," she said. "Claire's worried too. We're all saying the same thing. Doesn't that mean something?" I watched her, the woman I had loved for decades, the partner I had once believed in. Now every sentence felt like a strategy note lifted from the and transcript. When she left, I locked the office and sat in the dark. My phone buzzed once more. A text from Rodriguez. "Window 3 showed you the messenger." Next comes the message. I leaned back in the chair, the weight of the red folder in the safe pressing at my mind. The pieces were falling into place. Elaine sensed the cracks. Victor was pressing harder, and I had in my hands enough to turn their scheme into evidence. The only question left was when to strike. The message arrived at dawn. I had just poured the first coffee when the vibration came against the counter. No name, just a number I didn't recognize. The text was short, 6 words. "They're filing Friday. Be ready Monday." I read it twice, then set the phone flat on the wood. The kitchen was still, the house even quieter than usual. Elaine's door was closed upstairs, her side of the house heavy with sleep or the act of pretending. I copied the text into my notebook, logged the time, and saved the message to 2 secure drives. Evidence didn't shout. It whispered, and you had to learn to catch the words. By 8, I was at Miriam's office. She read the message, folded her hands, and said, "That's not gossip, Colin. That's a calendar. They'll file an emergency petition for support or injunction. You'll be served Monday, maybe Tuesday, which means we prepare today." She gave me 3 assignments. First, a sworn affidavit listing my independent accounts, all documented with receipts. Second, witness statements from staff who could confirm my steady behavior in recent months. Third, a motion for protective order against dissipation, to be filed the same hour they filed theirs. She spoke with calm precision, the way surgeons must when they're about to cut. I nodded, took the folders, and promised them back by nightfall. On the drive home, the air felt colder than the season allowed. I pulled into the lumberyard, walked the aisles of stacked boards, and let the smell of pine and glue steady me. Every straight edge and measured cut reminded me why I built things in the first place. Honest work doesn't plot behind your back. By noon I had signed affidavits from Marla and 2 supervisors who'd been with me for years. They agreed to testify that I hadn't changed, hadn't raged, hadn't shown signs of paranoia. They said I'd been steady, if quieter, focused on numbers, not shadows. Their words would counter any narrative Elaine tried to float about sudden decline. At 2, I stopped at the bank again. Miss Larson met me with a new report. Another attempt had been made, this one through a joint account, blocked automatically. She slid me a printout of the IP address log. Not my home, not my office. A downtown location traced to Victor's firm. She said quietly, "This isn't sloppiness, this is persistence. We'll preserve the log." I thanked her, then walked out with the paper folded into my pocket. Each document, each line of print, was a thread in the net, tightening around them. When I pulled into the driveway, Elaine's car was already there. She stood at the kitchen window, her profile still elegant after all these years, but harder now, sharper. She smiled when I came in, but the smile reached nowhere near her eyes. "How was your day?" she asked. "Steady," I said. The word I'd been using like a shield. She studied me, then said, "Victor called. He wants us to meet tomorrow, just to smooth things out. You should come." The phrasing was wrong. Us, not me. He was drawing her closer, or she was drawing him. Either way. The noose was visible now, even if she thought it wasn't. I told her I was busy. She pressed just lightly, then let it go. But her eyes flickered toward the dining table, where a stack of papers lay under a folder I hadn't seen before. She covered them with a dish towel as if absent-minded. I said, "Nothing." That evening Claire arrived at the house. She wore the same expression she had as a girl when she was about to confront me about curfews. Half scared, half fierce. "Dad," she said, standing in the foyer. "I told him. I'm leaving. He knows." I pulled her into the office and shut the door. She sat down, exhaling hard. "He said I was betraying him, that I was siding with you against my own husband. He said Mom would never forgive me. I told him forgiveness wasn't what I was after. He packed a bag and stormed out. I don't know where he went." I put a hand over hers, steadying her fingers that shook despite her voice. "You did the right thing," I said. Her eyes welled but didn't break. Then, "Why does it feel like the floor's gone? Because truth always feels like falling at first, but you'll land." She nodded, wiped her eyes, and pulled herself straight again. We sat in silence until her breathing slowed. Then I showed her the text about Friday's filing. Her jaw clenched. "They're desperate," she whispered. "Victor was ranting about money last week, about how everything depended on timing. If he misses deadlines, creditors come down. That's why he's pushing Mom so hard. He needs her story as his lever, her insight cut clean. He wasn't building a case for her sake. He was building one to save himself." After Claire left, I walked through the house. Elaine was in the den, flipping channels, pretending not to notice the tension. Her phone lay beside her, screen glowing faintly with unread messages. She said without looking up, "Claire called me. She said things are hard for her right now. I hope you're not encouraging her to walk away from her marriage." Her words were calm, but her knuckles whitened on the remote. "I'm encouraging her to choose truth," I said. Elaine's eyes snapped to mine, then softened quickly, too quickly. "We all have different truths," she murmured, turning back to the screen. That night, I worked in the office until midnight. I sorted every file, labeled every folder, checked every copy. The safe clicked shut with the sound of a vault closing on history. Near 1 a.m., the phone buzzed again. Rodriguez. No greeting, just a sentence. Courier leaves Sycamore Thursday noon. Watch the courthouse Friday morning. I leaned back in the chair, staring at the dark screen. They were moving faster now, cracks widening with every attempt, and I was no longer waiting, I was preparing. Friday arrived with a clean sky that did not match the feeling in my chest. I drank coffee standing at the sink and watched light move across the maple. The message on my phone said they would file today and that I should be ready Monday. It felt less like a warning now and more like a timetable. I met Miriam outside the courthouse just after 9. She wore the same quiet navy she always wears when she intends to be listened to. She said we would not chase their filing. We would file our preservation motion and leave it on the record like a stone. She handed me a copy. The language asked for nothing dramatic. It asked that no one touch the accounts, that no one shift beneficiaries, that both parties preserve communications. Daylight on paper. We stood beneath the steps, while Rodriguez watched the doors from across the street with the patience of someone who has spent years learning how to stand still. Near noon, a courier from Sycamore walked in with a slim briefcase and walked out 20 minutes later with an empty one. Rodriguez lifted a hand to show he had seen enough. Miriam nodded once. That was all we needed. Paper had moved. The calendar had started. The weekend passed in a measured quiet that felt like the hours before a storm hits a field. Elaine moved through the house, making lists for the week, as if the act of writing chores could transform the shape of Monday. She asked if I wanted roast on Sunday. I said yes, because a plate on a table is sometimes the only thing that keeps a home from becoming a stage. Claire stopped by with a bag of pantry items for her sublet and asked if I had a spare lamp. I brought one from the basement and fixed the wobbly switch with a small screwdriver while she watched. She said thank you in a voice that held and released in the same breath. Sunday night, I set out my jacket and placed the red folder near the top of the safe where my hand would find it in the morning without thought. I slept in short pieces and woke before the alarm. Monday in domestic relations court did not smell like drama. It smelled like paper and coffee and the faint clean of disinfectant. Families sat in rows with faces that had already done too much work. Judge Hart stood at the bench with the patience of someone who has seen every kind of truth and still expects proof. Elaine sat at the petitioner table with the Sycamore attorney, who wore the embossed initials I had seen on the portfolio. Elaine had chosen grey and pearls again, her hair neat, her mouth set in soft worry. Victor sat 2 rows back in the gallery with a legal pad and the restless tapping habit of men who cannot stop moving even when they should. I sat beside Miriam and kept my hands flat on my knees. Sycamore spoke first. She said the words emergency and financial control and support in a tone built to sound reasonable. She said I had restricted access, that I had changed passwords, that I had isolated funds. She said there was concern for safety, not physical, but emotional and financial. She said the words pattern and manipulation. She tried to make the bank holds proof of paranoia. Miriam rose without hurry. She said counsel. Add it backwards. She said we had placed verification holds to preserve the estate. She placed our motion on the table. She listed dates. She mentioned the fraud officer by name and handed up the incident numbers. She said that any attempt to move beneficiaries had failed for a reason, and that we had asked the bank to hold camera footage. She said we had a timeline of activity that did not tell a story with adjectives. It told one with stamps and logs. Judge Hart looked at Sycamore and asked for specifics. She asked what exactly had been denied to Elaine. She asked for bills unpaid, or food withheld, or utilities cut. Sycamore did not have those. She had phrases. She moved to the narrative. She said close friends and daughter were concerned. She used Claire like a tool. Claire stood quietly at the back and did not move. Miriam asked to call the fraud officer. The court allowed a phone appearance. Ms. Larson spoke in the crisp tone of people who file reports for a living. She confirmed that attempted changes had occurred and had been blocked by flags requested by me. She confirmed that an in-person attempt had been made and that the teller had followed policy. She confirmed that an online attempt had traced to an address not associated with my home. She read the last 4 digits of the IP log so the court would understand these were not drama points, they were numbers. Miriam then said there was additional context. She did not play the full recording. She did not need to. She presented the index and 2 short clips, one that established voices, one that established intention. Judge Hart listened with the expression of someone reading a map and finding the same road twice. Elaine kept her eyes forward, but her fingers tightened on the table edge until her knuckles paled. Victor stopped tapping. Sycamore objected to the recording and called it invasive. Miriam did not argue for sport. She argued enough. She said the clip was provided to demonstrate that financial preservation was a response to a real threat, not an act of control. She offered the court the preservation letter sent to Sycamore on the day counsel was retained. She offered the bank camera hold number. She offered to provide the full audio under seal for in-camera review, if the court believed it necessary. The judge said the index and the corroboration would suffice for now. Then Miriam did something I will remember until I cannot remember anything. She spoke about dignity, not as theatre, as record. She said the court was not being asked to decide who loved whom. She said the court was being asked to prevent dissipation and to keep a home from becoming a ledger. She said we were asking for daylight and quiet. Judge Hart leaned back and spoke to the room, not to us. She said family court is not a stage for tactics. She said emergency relief is for people who cannot buy milk, not for lawyers who cannot meet timelines. She turned to Elaine and asked if she had been denied groceries or shelter or electricity in the last month. Elaine said no. She asked if I had barred her from the house. Elaine said no. She asked if there had been threats of harm. Elaine said no. The word hung in the air like a bell. The judge denied the emergency petition. She granted our preservation motion. She ordered both parties to maintain status quo and to refrain from changing beneficiaries or moving funds. She ordered both parties to preserve communications. She scheduled a status conference 30 days out. She looked at Sycamore and said, the court would expect tailored pleadings, not broad narratives. She looked at Miriam and said, thank you for the clarity. Then she looked at the gallery and said, this case will not be tried in whispers. We stepped into the hallway with the kind of relief that is not joy, but the end of tension you did not know you were holding in your shoulders. Claire came to us and stood in front of me with her jaw set. She said she was proud. She said she would give a statement if needed. Her eyes were wet, but not failing. She hugged Miriam with the gratitude of someone who has finally met a professional who does not treat pain like a script. Victor stood near the elevators, pretending to read his phone. A man in a grey suit approached him and spoke in a tone too low for the hall to carry. Victor went still. He nodded once, then again, then tucked the paper he had been handed into. His folder with hands that tried to look steady. He left without looking at us. Elaine stood a few feet away, holding the strap of her handbag like a lifeline. She watched us, and then looked down as if the floor might offer a different answer. She did not approach. I did not either. There are words that cannot be said in front of marble. In the weeks that followed, the shape of our life changed in measurable steps. The bar committee set a hearing for Victor after additional complaints surfaced about payments routed through wrong accounts. I did not attend. I did not need to. Claire moved the last of her things into the sublet. She bought a fern and a small, second-hand table and sent me a photo of sunlight on wood. She set up her practice hours again and told me she had 3 new clients who had found her through word of mouth. She said she was building from the inside out. Elaine moved to a rented condo near the town centre. She sent through council a list of items she wanted from the house, and I approved most and declined some. I kept the solid things a home is built with: the bench I made for the porch, the kitchen table with the long, pale knife scratches, the photo of carrots in a crooked frame. We did not speak outside council. That was not cruelty. That was a new kind of respect. Miriam guided the slow work of separation with the same steady hand she had used in the hearing. There were no dramatic victories. There were just careful lines drawn where old lines had blurred. The stores remained mine. The accounts stayed put until the court said otherwise. There would be a division in time, and it would be fair in the way that systems call fair. What mattered was that it would not be theft. One afternoon in early summer, I stood in the training bay at the flagship and watched 4 apprentices learn to hang a door. The senior carpenter showed them how to shim and sight and listen. He said, "Wood talks if you stop trying to argue." I set aside a fund that day for apprentices who wanted to move from hourly to trade. The paperwork called it a scholarship. The crews called it a hand-up. I did not put my name on it. I did not need to. On a quiet evening when the heat finally broke, I sat on the back steps with a cup of coffee and the sound of sprinklers 3 yards over. The house was smaller in its noise now, but larger in its honesty. I could feel the way. The air moved through the rooms again. The maple threw a good shade across the lawn, and for the first time in months I recalled the smell of soil without thinking about paper. Claire pulled into the driveway and walked up with a bag of groceries, like she used to do when she was 20 and saving for a car. She said she had a free hour and wanted to cook. She moved in the kitchen with the same clumsy grace she had always had, and when the knife nicked the board, it left a faint new mark alongside the old pale lines. We ate at the table and talked about small things. A client who had asked good questions. A neighbor who had planted tomatoes too close together. A shipment of cedar lattice that had arrived on time. When she left, she stood on the porch and looked at me in that way she has when she wants to lay a thing down without making it heavy. She said we had done a hard piece well. She said not perfect, but honest. She hugged me and drove off into a sky that had finally decided on a color. I locked up and walked back through the rooms. I paused at the office door and rested my hand on the frame like Elaine used to when she wanted kindness to go first. The safe hummed low in the corner. The red folder sat inside, thinner now that it had done its work. I left it there, not as a trophy, as a reminder that you can protect what you have without becoming what you fear. I turned off the lights and let the house teach me it's quiet again. Justice in a place like this does not arrive with trumpets. It arrives as a steady morning, a door that still fits its hinges, a daughter who knows where she stands, and a man who can sit in his own kitchen and breathe all the way down. The storm had passed. The walls were still up. The work would go on.